My Lords, I speak to Amendments 139 and 140, to which I've added my name, and I draw attention to my interests set out in the register. It's an immense privilege to support the noble Lady Baroness Kennedy, and I'm grateful for her immense wisdom, knowledge, and experience. I'm also grateful to the noble Baroness Hamway for her excellent and candid laying out of the issues, and it's a privilege to follow her. In my role as Anglican Bishop for women's prisons, and now my recent appointment as Anglican Bishop for the whole prison estate in England and Wales, I've made prison visits and spoken with prisoners, volunteers and staff, including governors and chaplains. As president of the Nelson Trust, I've heard firsthand the positive impact of trauma-informed practice in their excellent work with women serving their sentences in the community and indeed with women leaving prison. And over the past few years, I've spoken with charities, organisations and community workers. And in all of those conversations, common themes emerge. One is the so-called revolving door of short custodial sentences leading to catastrophic consequences for a woman and her family, often exacerbating a downward spiral into more serious offences and an inability to secure employment. A second theme is the number of women who come into contact with the criminal justice system who have experienced domestic abuse and previous trauma, and how this becomes a driver for their offending, in some circumstances defending herself against her abuser, as we have heard. Women become trapped in a vicious cycle of victimisation and criminal activity, and their situation is often worsened by poverty, substance dependency or poor mental health. Almost 60% of women supervised in the community or in custody who have an assessment have experienced domestic abuse. The true figure is probably much higher. The Nelson Trust recently shared with me a painful example of this complex issue and how important it is to have a trauma-based approach. During the first lockdown, the Nelson Trust were called on a point of arrest referral scheme. If a woman's arrested and identified as vulnerable, she can be referred to organisations such as the Nelson Trust for support. A woman had been arrested as a perpetrator of domestic abuse and was very distressed. At the Women's Centre, they found she was covered in bruises. She'd experienced horrific sexual and physical violence during lockdown. She'd taken to alcohol to cope with the abuse and then retaliated against her abuser and ended up in custody. Now, in this case, the Nelson Trust were able to help the woman to access a refuge, and they enabled her to leave her abusive partner. But another story I heard was of a woman serving a sentence for murder after retaliating against her abusive partner, who'd assaulted her for many years, including when she was pregnant with their child. Recently, the Nelson Trust advocated for a vulnerable woman who'd retaliated against her partner after years of psychological abuse. She was acquitted. Many like her are not. With these amendments, there's an opportunity to extend much better legal protection to victims of domestic abuse whose experiences of domestic abuse lead them to offend. At the moment, there's very little legal protection in the system to allow those victims to be diverted away from the criminal justice system to vital support. Within the criminal justice system, there is much overlap between those who are victims of crime and those who are perpetrators. Last year, a report by the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Women in the Penal System, of which I'm an officer, uncovered cases of women contacting the police to report domestic incidents, only to find that they ended up being arrested themselves. The Howard League for Penal Reform asked one police force to analyse its data on arrests of women and girls over a 2-year period. It turned out that almost 3/4 of the women arrested had previously come to the attention of the police as victims of violence or sexual violence. More than half of them have been victims of domestic abuse. There is obviously much more to be done with police forces and diversion work, as well as changing the law. My Lords, I'm not a lawyer, but I am a passionate supporter of trauma-informed interventions and doing all that we can to recognising the root causes and the drivers of criminal behaviour. As a Christian and as a Lord Spiritual, I am committed to a legal framework that emphasises restorative and reparative justice. I wholeheartedly support these amendments, and I look forward to hearing the rest of this debate.